Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you are well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories. And if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. And let's crack on with today's first story. Much love, guys. Now, today's first story comes from Julie586 and says, me, 22 female, with my fellow student, 22 female, is trying to blackmail me into writing her theses. Ooh, dearie me. I'm at my wit's end with this very effed up situation with my fellow student Danielle. I'll be a bit vague here because a lot of my friends use Reddit. Danielle and I are in college. We're both working on our bachelor's degree. We started out as friends, but our relationship got a bit weird. She was often acting really entitled and like I had to cater to her every need. She would also scream at me often, especially when we were out partying. Because of that, I decided not to spend any more time with her around last Christmas. However, in the last 2 years I was friends with her, she naturally learned a lot about me. Some of those things could definitely get me into legal trouble. I haven't talked to Danielle in a few months, but I heard that she is having trouble keeping up with her courses. Some weeks ago she showed up at my place, drunk, and told me that she expects me to write her theses. It's a 50-page essay we have to hand in until July, and it will be crucial to finishing our degree, or else she will tell everyone, including the police, about the stuff I did. And yes, she also has proof. I thought it was a stupid joke or that she was just super drunk until I came home yesterday and found a note from her saying the exact same thing and a USB stick with her working title and some ebooks I should include in my writing. Reddit, what do I do here? Write the damn thing for her? Don't and risk her going to the police? I can't really risk that though. She could get me in serious trouble. I've spoken to one friend of mine and he told me to write it but write it badly. I don't know if that's such a good idea. Also, I still have to finish up my own theses. I have no idea if I'll even be able to write hers in time. TLDR, fellow college student knows some things about me that could get me into serious trouble. She now wants me to write a 50-page essay for her. How do I avoid this? Edit. I was hoping I didn't have to say what I did, but here goes. I had a short fling with one of the assistant professors. He didn't know I was a student there though. It was a complicated situation. Anyway, I got my hands on some exam sheets and sent them to several friends including Danielle. So her proof is that email with the attachment. It's pretty solid proof. I sent it from my spam email address that I normally don't use, which doesn't have my name in it, but I'm sure they could backtrack it with the IP address and so on. There is no way I could come clean to the university as I will probably get expelled. I should also add that in the note I got from her, she's explicitly accusing me of that, with name of course, date of the exam. I'm very reluctant to show it to anyone. A comment comes in with some info and says, nah, they can't backtrack it to find the IP. I'm a network engineer with a lot of experience with email. Whoever is your email provider, i.e. Google if you use Gmail, would have logs of the IP address you were using when you send your emails, and your IP for when you check your email. How long they keep those logs varies from provider to provider, but it isn't going to be something they keep for years. The person and email provider you send the email to, however, would not know your IP address. They only know the IP of your email provider. Let's say you committed a serious crime. The cops would have to go to your provider, say Gmail with a warrant, and ask for the IP addresses you access the email from. Then they would have to find which ISP controls those IP addresses and ask them whose addresses were assigned to at that time. Again, that is not data they hold on to forever. Lastly, they would have to find out which person was using the address. If you're in a shared apartment or accessing a public Wi-Fi, that would be impossible. The cops aren't going to do this for something as minor as academic fraud, which is probably not even a crime, merely an honor code violation, and Google, or whoever your email provider is, isn't going to turn that data over without a warrant. I would not worry about your IP being tracked. Commenter says, blackmail is illegal. Googling state name plus blackmail law should give you the relevant laws. If you have proof she was going to blackmail you in writing of some kind, example text, then kindly inform her to fuck off. Now this could be like a really dumb comment from me, but I'm kind of with that last commenter with the amount of stories where the police end up doing absolutely nothing for, which seems more serious stuff in some of the stories we've covered. I'm not sure I'd be too worried if I were OP. I'm not saying what OP did was right, because it clearly wasn't, but Danielle's blackmail is hardly something she'd want to explain either. If it were me, I'd be telling her to fuck right off. Well, there's even a little petty part of me saying, yeah, I'll do it, and then wait until the last minute when she can no longer do it herself and then hand her the USB. Ooh, spicy. But OP does come in with her update and says, "Hi everyone, and thanks so much for all your great advice in my original post. First off, I wanted to clarify something because there seems to be a misunderstanding regarding my edit in the original post. The exam sheets I sent to my friends were of a completely unrelated course and we didn't actually use them, so there was no cheating involved or something. Here's what happened, and I'm aware this makes me look super stupid. I met a guy, let's call him Tom, at the place where I work part-time. He asked me out on a date and we had 3 dates as a whole. He obviously thought I worked full-time at the place we met. He on the other hand told me he was a researcher, maybe because it sounds more exciting than being a professor at 28, or maybe he's both. And it might sound unbelievable that me being a student never came up, but we both had traveled a bit and mainly talked about that. After 3 dates, I slept at his place for the first time, and when he went to buy breakfast in the morning, I looked around a bit in his apartment, and there were some exam sheets on his desk. There was one with the answer key, and then some exams that were already taken by students, so he was correcting those tests. I text a friend of mine, not Danielle. "Oh shit, I think he's a professor." Friend texts back saying, "No way, he's too young. Proof?" She had seen pictures of him. I then took a pic of the answer sheet and sent an email to 4 friends of mine, including Danielle, writing something really douchey along the lines of, "This is how you get yourself through college or something." It was supposed to be funny, but I cringed typing that. I realized now that I was actually super lucky because I lost my iPhone that week and had to use an old phone of mine without WhatsApp, where the email app was not linked to my college email address. So that's why I didn't just send the pic via app, but had to send it over email with my old spam email address. I hadn't used that email address in at least 5 years, and that was the only time I used it because the next day I got my iPhone back. Also, just a side note, when Tom came back from getting breakfast, I said I had to go because I had classes. He looked pretty shocked, and I told him I only work at place part-time, and I'm also a student. He just said goodbye, and that's the last I ever saw or heard of him. So we never contacted each other again. I later found him on the website's homepage. He's indeed a professor, but for a completely different course. Like if I would study communications and he would teach microbiology. I hope this makes him look less like a predator, as some commenters have called him. So the thing Danielle has on me is actually not cheating on a test, but sleeping with a professor and taking pics of exam sheets, even though completely unrelated to my courses. As a proof of being at his place / presumably sleeping with him, now that I think of it, she doesn't really have evidence on that. The picture I took only shows the piece of paper on a wooden desk. I could have found it on campus or something. She also knows of smoking weed, but as many of you have pointed out, that is not something the police would be interested in. Anyway, I read through all your comments. Some of you said that she would incriminate herself by outing me because she cheated on an exam. Well, that wouldn't be the case, but everyone seems to agree that IP address tracking doesn't work the way I imagined, so she doesn't really have anything on me, right? I still don't really want to go to the police, especially because of Tom, because he's a genuinely nice guy. I actually thought about contacting him again after I finished my degree, but don't know if that's a good idea. I'm still afraid if Danielle went to the college or police, just saying that a professor was sleeping with a student, they wouldn't even need any evidence and still launch an investigation because it's such a touchy subject. So I'm not sure about that. I think the best course of action would be to write Danielle something like this. "Hello Danielle. Unfortunately, I have no idea what you are talking about. I've never sent out any exam answers, but what you are doing sounds a lot like blackmail, which is illegal to my knowledge. For the sake of our old friendship, I will not directly go to the police for now, as I'm suspecting you didn't really mean what you said in your note. I heard that tutor is great at helping students get started with their theses, and I'm sure he can help you. What do you think, or just ignore? Also talk to the other 3 girls involved, and they all deleted the email as they're not in contact with Danielle either. I don't think I need to worry about them. TLDR, not sure if I should deny or ignore Danielle completely." Commenter says, "Quit trying to play nice here. Take the thumb drive she gave you and all the communications you have from her to the professor in charge of the theses. Tell them exactly what she wants you to do, and tell them she's saying she'll tell everyone you slept with a professor and stole answers for a test while he was grading them. You did neither of those things, but you know what those kind of accusations can do to a student, much less whatever professor she decides to sleep with. Ask what they plan to do about it, because there's no way you're writing her theses, but you don't want to get in trouble for something you didn't do." OP responded saying, "I think that's actually a good idea. In my last thread, many people told me to just deny everything, but it seems I didn't really do anything illegal, and I think she actually deserves to have this brought to the attention of her professor." Commenter says, quoting, "I then took a pic of the answer sheet and sent an email to 4 friends of mine, including Danielle, writing something really douchey along the lines of, 'This is how you get yourself through college or something.' It was supposed to be funny, but I cringed typing that, and then says, 'This is seriously what this is all about. Yeah, your reply works, but why are you ever taking this seriously? I doubt the professor would even get in trouble. He didn't know you were a student, you weren't in his field, and he stopped immediately after finding out. Both of you can corroborate this. This girl has so little on you, I'm amazed you even took it seriously. Opie says, I'm really relieved. Danielle and my group of friends have been giving me shit for this ever since it happened, pretending like it's the most disgusting thing in the world to sleep with an older guy and always making jokes about him/us going to jail for it. So then Opie started adding some edits on the back of it saying, okay, seems like I actually did nothing wrong, or at least nothing illegal. I'm not going to reply to Danielle, and I'm heading over to a professor in an hour to tell him about the blackmail, and maybe take it to the dean. Still unsure if I should give Tom a heads up, but I think I'm just going to leave him out of this. Also, haven't seen him in months, so not sure how he'd react. Edit 2, I just came back from the professor, Danielle's thesis advisor. I told him I was being blackmailed by Danielle to write her thesis because of a short relationship with a professor from another department. I looked it up. As long as the professor doesn't have to grade you, it's actually okay. He said something along the lines of, that's interesting because she already missed the first deadline or something. I'd planned to go to the dean, but he then took me to the department head instead and explained the problem to him. But he left out the part with the blackmail. He just said the student was asked to write another student's thesis. He was also really angry about the whole thing. Later I was alone with the department head and he asked me why she would think I would write the thesis for her. I told him the same thing I told the professor about the blackmail. Now the department head actually asked me who I had this relationship with, and I said I wasn't comfortable to say, but he was from another department altogether, and that was it. I left the USB with them, so I don't really have anything to go to the police with, but they said they would take matters into their own hands now, and I shouldn't worry about it anymore. And when I asked if I should go to the police, they said no. I don't know. I then went to Tom's office. I was super nervous about talking to him, but I just wanted to let him know in case Danielle said anything crazy. So I got there and he was pretty surprised to see me. I kinda told him the whole thing. I didn't mention the pics though, and he reacted pretty okay. He told me he was sorry he never called again, but when I said I was a student, he kind of panicked and deleted all our texts and my number. And then he talked to his head of department, who told him it's actually no big deal. Then he actually deleted my number. Then I asked him if he wanted my number again, and he said he has a girlfriend now. So that was pretty embarrassing, but I kind of laughed it off, and here we are. I blocked Danielle, by the way. I was left after this one. It was like, oh my word, the whole thing was like built on a mountain of absolute nonsense. You know, OP made a stupid decision by taking the photo, but it wasn't even related to one of her courses. The professor wasn't grading her, and once he realized she was a student, ended things immediately. Meanwhile, you got Danielle, who's trying to blackmail someone into writing an entire thesis over something that she massively exaggerated. Bloody hell. I really wanted to know what happened to Danielle after this. Maybe someone with a student college background may know more. Never been down that path, so I don't know what may happen without doing a lot of Googling. I prefer to read your comments on it. So let me know what you guys think happened down in the comments below, and let's move on to another story. Now, our next story comes from Recital Funeral Throwaway, who says, am I the arsehole here for prioritizing my daughter's recital over a funeral? My daughter, 5 years old, had a dance recital on Saturday. The dance studio scheduled everything a couple of months ago, so my husband and I were prepared to attend. Last Wednesday, my father informed me his mother-in-law, his wife's mother, had passed away, and the funeral would be on Saturday. He said that he and his wife wanted me to attend it with my family, but would settle for just me. I'll be honest, I didn't want to go. I didn't have a close relationship with my father's mother-in-law, and my kids saw her once a year at most. But I wouldn't mind attending if it weren't for my daughter's recital. The funeral would take place in a different city, a very short flight away, which my father had offered to cover, so it wouldn't be possible to attend both. I offered my condolences but said my daughter had a dance recital on Saturday, and my family wouldn't be able to attend the funeral. My father said he understood why I couldn't take my children. Though his wife was disappointed, I wouldn't just tell my daughter's dance studio that there had been a family emergency. In spite of that, they both thought I should still go on my own. They said that my husband could attend the recital on his own, that missing one of my daughter's events where I'm there for everything else wouldn't be a big deal, and that she's so young that she probably wouldn't remember it anyway. She'd have more recitals in the future, but the funeral would only happen once. I stood my ground. Saturday came, I attended my daughter's dance recital. Both my father and his wife were radio silent all day, and I chose not to bother them. My father finally called me yesterday, and we had an argument. He said his wife was inconsolable because her mother loved me and my children, and it broke her heart that we weren't there to say our goodbyes. He also said he was disappointed at how dismissive I'd been of his wife and her family, and he couldn't believe I'd refused to make such a small sacrifice for someone who would drop everything to do the same for me. I continued to stand by what I did. I understand her passing was sudden and the funeral was rushed, but I had made a commitment to my daughter and I wanted to honor it. My father said she should be old enough to understand that her mum had something more important to do. Am I the arsehole here? So within the comments, people were asking questions and OP was given some more context. One of the commenters says, I don't want to say you're an arsehole exactly, but depending on your relationship with your dad and his wife, you weren't very nice to them. Funerals aren't for the dead. They are for the living loved ones who are suffering the loss. Now it sounds like that's not you, which is fine. I have distant relatives that I've been fairly indifferent about when they passed. But if you have a good relationship with your dad and everything I wrote below hinges on the idea that you do, you should go to the funeral when he asks to support him while he grieves. It sounds like he really wanted you there and it added to his hurt that you refused to attend. With that being said, I agree that you should always seek to keep commitments you make to your children, but there are going to be times when you can't. This could have been a good opportunity for you to teach your child a somewhat complicated lesson about when it's okay to break a commitment and the value in showing up for others when they're in need. If your children don't learn that sometimes the best play plans go sideways because of events beyond their control, they can become very rigid and unforgiving in their approach to life. I want to finish by saying that I lost my dad unexpectedly earlier in the year, and since I've been pondering some of the smaller details of our relationship, I can imagine if I was in the situation you described here, I'd be beating myself up for a little shunning his bid for support and understanding. Opie says, I think that's a very good comment. I'll try to answer your questions as well as I can. I'm not close with my father's wife and consider extended family at best. My father and I have a rocky relationship for various reasons, but I do love him and we see each other on a decently frequent basis. I show up to almost everything my father and his wife invited me to. My father wasn't fond of his mother-in-law and, based on their history, did not want me there to support him. He wanted me there to support his wife. Both of them have a history of wanting me and her to be closer than we are. I'm perfectly fine with our current relationship and have no interest in bonding with her any further for a number of reasons. I really do not think my daughter should need to learn anything from this. If anything, I'd rather show her she will always come first to me. I agree it's important to teach kids things that don't always go according to plan, but there are other ways to teach this. I'm very sorry to hear about your father, and I hope you're doing well. Commenter says, maybe. I'm assuming that your father's wife is not your biological mum, and therefore your father's mother-in-law is your step-grandmother, and your child's step-great-grandmother. If not, these are your biological mother and grandmother, then woo, yeah, you're the arsehole. It does seem pretty selfish to skip a singular event. You only get one funeral. That family requested you at for support in order to attend a 5-year-old's dance recital. Opie says, she's not my mother. The deceased wasn't my grandmother. Neither of them were around when I was a child. I was an adult when my father started dating his now wife. I understand it might have been insensitive of me to skip the funeral, but I don't think this wouldn't have upset my daughter. The commenter says, I'm really curious if your dad actually wanted you there or if your stepmother was just pushing for it. Opie says, I think both. She definitely pressured him, but he has a history of not caring about my commitments and schedules. Princess says, this info should be farther up. Your relationship with your dad is really what matters here. Opie says, that tracks. I think I underestimated how relevant my history with my father and his wife would be. Commenter says, info. How long has his wife been in the picture? How close are you to her? Funerals are for the living. Opie says, they've been married for about 6 years. Together for a bit longer, but we're not close at all. I was an adult when they started dating, so I never really built a family bond with her. Negative says, was he right about she'd do the same for you? Opie says, to be honest, I don't know. I always thought their treatment of me and my family was extremely performative, but we genuinely weren't close enough for me to be certain how far she'd go for me. If I had to guess, I'd say no. Commenter says, not the arsehole, your father is being inconsistent. Opie says they always exaggerated it, especially when it came to her relationship with my children. She's always said she loved them like her own grandchildren, but she hardly ever saw them, and they didn't really see her as a great-grandmother. Commenter replies saying, did she send them gifts on their birthdays, call you to chat, or wish them happy birthday? Opie says, it's definitely performative. That much I've always known. She never sent my kids gifts or called on their birthdays. I never expected her to. I'm not close with my father's wife. Commenter says, you're making a point to show up for your children, maybe because your father showed up for you. Opie says, I don't think it matters, but my father wasn't very active in my life until the divorce. I make a point to show up for my kids because I love them. My mother was the one who showed up for me. I'm not a vindictive person, and that has nothing to do with why I choose to prioritize my children, which is why I didn't mention that. Commenter just replies, fair enough, and OP says, again, I'm not vindictive. I try not to hold this against my father, but that is not an excuse. Someone says, info. There seems to be a conflict between how close you felt to your dad's mother-in-law and how close your dad thinks she felt to you. OP says, we're not close, and I do have reasons why I don't want to be. All that said, I usually show up to everything she invites me to. I'm there for birthdays, dinners, events, etc. I buy gifts on Christmas. My husband cooks for get-togethers. Commenter replies saying, so for all intents and purposes, you're in fact family and behave as family. OP says, no. I do that out of politeness and because my father is involved. I also do that for friends. Commenter says, quoting, I'll be honest, I didn't want to go, and then says, not the arsehole. OP replies saying, I think she always wanted to believe we were closer than we were. Ironically, her intensity regarding this is one of many reasons why I didn't want us to be close. I will say that in my country, funerals usually take place very shortly after death. Now, I was already not the arsehole to begin with, but the more context that came out within those comments, the more it just sort of felt like it was a father trying to force a relationship that never really existed. You know, OP wasn't skipping the funeral of a beloved grandparent. This was her dad's wife's mother, someone she wasn't close to and only really saw out of politeness. Meanwhile, you got your own daughter who had a recital she'd been looking forward to for months. And I don't buy the bullshit of father saying a 5-year-old wouldn't remember a mum missing the recital. Now, maybe not every detail, but kids absolutely remember who shows up for them. And maybe it's because I've been to so many funerals in my life, including my parents, but I just can't get behind the idea that someone should miss an important moment with their own child to attend one. And I get people grieve differently, and I totally respect that. I say that in so many stories, but I wouldn't begrudge someone for choosing to support their child instead of coming to even my parents' funeral. But OP does update the post and says, hey everyone, this got long, so I'll go ahead and post it here. There are some things I want to address before I move on to the update. I want to thank you all for your comments and insight on my original post, even if you decide I was in the wrong. I assure you I posted because I truly want alternate opinions, so I'm grateful for your feedback. There were, however, 2 things some people said I still firmly disagree with. First, the claim that my father was asking me for support and I let him down. Based on his past behavior, he did not need or want my support. He wanted me to support his wife. He wasn't fond of his mother-in-law, and both my father and his wife have a long history of wanting me and her to be closer than we are. I'm perfectly fine with our current relationship and have no interest in bonding with her any further for a number of reasons. I'll take the opportunity to state that my father and his wife have been married for 6 years and together for only a little longer. I was already an adult when I met her, and we have never been close. I consider her extended family at best, and I did not consider her mother family. That is the main reason this didn't constitute a family emergency to me. I literally met my husband before I met her mother. I have told my father I don't really think of them as family several times, but he refuses to accept it. That leads me to the idea I could have used this as an opportunity to teach my daughter that sometimes plans have to change, and it's important to show up for family, which was the other claim I disagree with. I agree it's important to teach kids that things don't always go according to plan, and realistically, I know I won't always be able to show up for my daughter. I have a career, another child, and other commitments that might need to take priority sometimes. This was not one of those times. I wasn't close with my father's mother-in-law, and I was absolutely capable of being there for my daughter. On to the actual update. I posted here because I wanted alternate opinions. I genuinely didn't know what to think about what I'd done. As I've stated, there are things that were said that I disagree with, and I don't expect that to change, but I also agreed with some who thought I was in the wrong. In particular, I agree I could have been more empathetic. I didn't send flowers or a card, and condolences are the bare minimum. I also disagree with those on my side who said that they should have confirmed the date with me before scheduling the funeral if my presence was that important. I had no relation to the deceased. It wouldn't be fair for her funeral to depend on my schedule. At first, I walked away from my first post as conflicted as I felt going in, but I definitely had a lot more insight. I contemplated the situation for a few days and managed to come to a few conclusions. I also ended up talking to a few people in my life. My husband was still very firmly on my side. My mother said I could have been more sensible, but also that she'd probably have done the same thing I did. Then I talked to my younger sister, and it was during that conversation that I found out that not only had she not been pressured to attend the funeral, she hadn't even been invited in the first place. She had spoken with our father several times since his mother-in-law died, but he hadn't told her about anything besides the fact that she had passed. I was the only one he'd expected to attend. I think that was my breaking point. Not to sound childish, but why is it always me? Why do I always have to be the one expected to drop everything? Why does my father feel the need to keep pushing his wife and her family onto me and mine? So in the end, my main conclusion was that this wasn't just about the funeral. My father has always had unfair and unrealistic expectations of me, and I need to make it stop. I've decided to distance myself from my father and his wife for a while. I love him, but I need time, and he needs to accept I have my own life. I'm also going back to therapy. I stopped a while ago, but I remember it helped. As for what will happen between me and my father, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Whenever he's ready to have an honest conversation about everything that happened, he knows where I'll be. Overall, I've decided what I did was wrong, but I've also accepted that I'd do it again. I don't remember all of my recitals, school plays, and events from when I was a kid, but I do remember my mum was there for all of them. Even if I can't always be there for my children, they will always come first to me, and I make sure they know that. I probably won't post again. Thank you for everything. Commenter says, damn, you got called a bunghole for this. I sense that your previous post that your dad and his wife were pushing your boundaries for a long time, trying to absorb you into their family and not recognizing that you have your own family. I applaud you for putting your kids first. I agree that his mother-in-law doesn't take priority when you were never close. Funerals and weddings have messy social rules. I think that makes people act bonkers. In this case, the funeral should have been for those who were close. It's not a grim party where everyone is obligated to perform their service for the dead. OP responded saying the final verdict on my post was not the arsehole actually, but I still don't completely agree with it. Like I said, I did a technically wrong thing and I don't regret it. Commenter replies saying, honestly, I don't think it was even technically wrong for you to skip the funeral. There is no moral or social requirement for you to attend the funeral of someone who is not an important person in your life, no matter what anyone else thinks. The only thing that you could maybe have done differently is to send a message to your dad and his wife on the day of the funeral, reiterating that you're sorry you can't make it, but you'll be thinking of them or something like that. OP said I decided not to bother them the day of because I didn't want to rub it in. In retrospect, I'm still not sure about that decision. Commenter says, I don't know if there was any way for you to make them happy in this situation. I suspect that even if you had gone to the funeral, they would have repeatedly talked about how disappointed they were that you didn't bring your whole family. OP says, probably. My father's wife seemed to be the only one upset about that, but they both tried to get my kids to bond with her and her mother too. We had an argument a couple of years ago because I wouldn't force my kids to hug her mother. My daughter was 3 and didn't remember her. It was their second time ever seeing each other. A commenter says, I do think you maybe should have sent flowers, but you made the right choice in not going. It's absolutely horrible that your little sister wasn't invited while they were guilting you into going. I know you feel like, why does it have to be me? But I also feel bad for your sister. Is she even considered family by your dad? OP says she is. He just always expected more of me. Growing up, she could vanish to a friend's house for days if she wanted and it was fine. If I did it, he complained I was too distant. I shouldn't have been surprised he didn't pressure her. Commenter says it's weird that they put so much pressure on you specifically, but didn't invite your little sister. I'm curious, does your little sister have kids? I've noticed some families have higher expectations of closeness with the children who have kids of their own because they want to be closer to the grandkids. OP replies saying she doesn't have kids, but this was already happening long before I had mine. I don't know why, but I used to think he and his wife would become less pushy once I moved out and started my family. I definitely got better at setting up my boundaries with time, but they still try to pressure me and my kids to be close with her. Commenter replies to that saying, does your father's wife have any kids of her own? If yes, any grandkids through them? If no, or if she does and they have little or no contact, she might consider you and your grandkids as props to say, my daughter and my grandchildren. Maybe she has said this in passing to your father. Oh, now I can be mum or grandmother, and took it to heart. OP says, no children of her own, but I don't think she ever wanted to consider me a daughter. I was in my 20s when we met, and she was a teenager when I was born. That was actually a huge problem I had with her in the early years of their relationship. What bond did she expect us to have? What did she want to be to me? She definitely wanted something with how pushy she always was, but I never figured out what. Commenter says, does your sister have children? I ask because if you do and she doesn't, I bet your dad's wife wants to try to weasel her way into being grandma. If your sister doesn't have children, she's of no use to her. OP says my sister doesn't have kids. My father had higher expectations of me our whole lives, but that angle doesn't make sense for his wife. My children don't see her as a grandparent. A commenter says, are you the oldest? My dad did something similar to me as far as expectations go, especially when he was in the process of marrying my evil stepmother. I didn't go along with his wishes because I simply don't owe him subservience, just like you don't owe that to your father. You're a good mum. Your daughter needed your support at a recital and you were there. Your priority should always be your immediate family. Now you're married with a kid. Your father has extended family. It is what it is. OP says, yep, oldest of 2 daughters. His wife isn't necessarily evil, but she has a very irritating personality. There are a number of other reasons why I never wanted to be close with her, and that only made her pushier. Another commenter says, "Hi, what you did was not wrong. Please don't beat yourself up." Opie says, "I do have to say my father and his wife have been married for 6 years, but together for longer. I met his mother-in-law a little under a decade ago. Still, I don't think I saw her more than a handful of times. My kids genuinely only saw her once a year at most, during the holidays. My daughter in particular saw her 4 times her whole life, since we didn't spend her first Christmas with them." And one more commenter says, "I would have made the same choice as you. My child comes first. Unless it was someone in my family or a very close friend, I wouldn't give up my child's recital. The fact that your sister wasn't invited by your father tells you everything you needed to know. Well done, back to therapy." Opie says, "If it was someone I considered family or a close friend, I would have gone to the funeral too. In that case, we'd probably be in the same city, so I'd try to find a way to attend both." And absolutely, again, still it's a not the arsehole from me on the back of this. It just seemed like the father was trying to force a relationship. Opie admitting that maybe they could have shown a bit more empathy in this situation, but still standing by a decision, which, good thing in my opinion. As for me, as I said before, I have a weird relationship with funerals and the way that I think about them these days. I kind of think when I finally pop my clogs, I hope nobody falls out over my funeral. If you want to attend, brilliant. If you rather raise a pint to me down the pub and tell a few embarrassing stories, absolutely crack on. Just don't start any family, friend drama over it, because life's too short for that bullshit, right? And I've told you before what my ideal send-off is. It's never going to happen, but it'd be so hilarious, just being strapped to a trebuchet and then launched out to sea ragdoll style. Perhaps adding a little whistling sound effect as I go on the way down. I mean, the mourners might find it a bit traumatic, but hey. But what about you guys? What do you think of this story? Maybe you've got a completely different opinion on the matter. Now, just a huge thank you for being here today, getting involved in the stories, your love, your support, your time. It always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much for being here. Truly, it's absolutely amazing. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.